Welcome back to the news, everybody. Okay, it is Starfield time. Today I'm going to break absolutely everything down. We've got to start off with the obvious thing, though, and that is the critical and player responses to the game just ahead of early access dropping. Those did come out. As of the time of my screenshot anyway, we're at an 87 on OpenCritic, with 93% of critics recommending. This undoubtedly is a pretty humongous win for them, actually. Now, amid all the glowing stuff, there are a few 7 out of 10s. IGN is actually one of them. A combination of disjointed space travel, non-existent maps, aggravating inventory management, and slow rollout of essential abilities very nearly did it in. It was the joys piloting a custom spaceship into and out of all sorts of morally ambiguous situations in a rich sci-fi universe that eventually pulled it out of a nosedive. That is from Dan Stapleton, who I believe is the reviews editor at IGN. And while I've got you here, what we do in this channel is bring you all the latest gaming news and updates almost every single day. It's not just me, I'm backed up by my research and editing team so that we can always bring you the best thought out stuff that's going on. So hit that sub button, because the vast majority of people who watch this channel actually haven't, and you can be one who has. And with that, let's get back to the story. Now, I've went through a absolute shitload of reviews and shitload of videos to try to bring you guys the balanced take. TLDR, right? This absolutely is a Bethesda Game Studios game, right? You can't really get around that. You will feel that, yes, it's made with similar technologies that have made other Bethesda games, right? NPCs just have that little bit of, creepy oddness to them. That being said, one of the things pretty much universal across reviews that I've seen is the gunplay is actually pretty damn good. Melee, a bit less so. Side quests, really damn good. Main quest, actually, people have been pretty positive on that, which to me was a surprise because, well, the main quests were usually the weaker part of the Bethesda entries. In terms of bugs, there are some, but it is essentially universal that this is the least buggy Bethesda release. And on the topic of performance, actually, on the Series X and the Series S, performance has been pretty damn good. Now, it is 4K 30. Of course, 4K as facilitated by FSR, but overall, it actually does hit its 30 FPS target and stays to that. Of course, you'd usually prefer a solid 30, right? Like good frame timings, rather than say, something that's absolutely all over the place, which can feel absolutely terrible. To summarize other things then, overall, the lore of the verse is actually surprisingly rich and deep. It does seem like an interpretation of the world that you, yes, would actually want to get lost in. And fascinatingly, whatever they've done with New Game Plus, and I don't want to spoil it or anything like that for you, I'll put it this way, and if you know Matt in our channel, this is what actually sealed the deal for him to get the game. Gene Park said that its New Game Plus is one of the most innovative takes on that they've ever done, even more so than Nier Automata, which to me is absolutely a crazy thing to say, which does mean that it is something special. So that in itself is pretty damn impressive. Overall then, it does seem that this is a really excellent game. Now, if you want some of the less positive points about the game, essentially if you were expecting, say, a Star Citizen-like experience where, you look at a planet, you fly down to that planet. Like, you can literally fly from here to here on the planet's surface and go anywhere. It's not like that. On Star Citizen, you can, say, drive a little dune buggy speeder thing out of your ship's cargo hold, and you could drive around the planet if you wanted. It would take you dozens of hours, maybe days to do that. It would be a stupid thing to do, but you could do it because it's all, well, physically there. It's not so in this game. When you are outside a planet, you can't fly down to that planet. You more have to, engage the bit of the UI that allows you to select where you go on the planet, right? So it's one of those things. It's not a complete, full, open, big No Man's Sky-like simulation of a solar system. It is more kind of like chunks that are stitched together in a way that they would hope is as seamless as is possible. Now, unfortunately, some of that is via loading screens or loading screens that are basically just masked by an animation. That's one of the consistent things that I have seen. It seems to me that if you wanted to do, say, a Star Citizen or No Man's Sky style thing, doing that with the amount of just handcrafted content in this game would very likely be a massive challenge. So this is one of those things where rather than having to completely overhaul how things work on a fundamental level, the cost of that probably would have been too great. So it seems like that is just a downside that they knowingly decided to take on in order to facilitate them actually making the game that they have made. Because yes, there are a stupid number of planets. There's loads of handcrafted content on those planets, but as well, there is procedural generation being used to stitch that stuff together. And I will talk about the actual amount of play space, because some stuff did appear online, and I think not all the discussion around it was perfect. Overall, then, I think the consensus is that this is a damn fine game. I would say the consensus is perhaps a little bit below what you'd be looking at with Skyrim, but definitely above the critical consensus, or at least the tone of the conversation that was surrounding Fallout 4. So that is actually pretty damn good news. And good news is exactly what Microsoft would want. The stakes have been extremely high for this one. They've had a rough time, and even like in this period of time, they're going to have to go up against Spider-Man 2 from Sony, which no doubt will do quite well. This is a game that must have been tracking well. Companies across the industry were pulling their games' release dates to not clash with it, with Baldur's Gate 3 even going forward almost a month so that it wouldn't be clashing with Starfield. Overall then, this is pretty major for Xbox, and it does seem that they've actually got that big win, which frankly after Redfall, yeah, they would kind of need. Okay, let's talk about bugs then. There are bugs. I think that is going to be happening in any game that is large like this one. However, per Tom Henderson's sources, this is the least buggy game launch ever. And more recently, looking at reviews, the reviewers' consensus does appear to be that this is the best performing, least buggy Bethesda Game Studios launch experience that there really ever has been, which certainly is a good thing. It does kind of make sense though. We earlier on, I think it was July of this year, we found out that basically all of QA across Microsoft was consumed with this. Right, so that's a lot of QA testing, and of course Starfield is a game that has been delayed multiple times. It was originally supposed to come out, I believe, November of 2022. Evidently, that time in the oven has done the game well. As for performance then, unfortunately we are stuck with 30 FPS on consoles. To me personally, that is a real big suck. However, for me, I'm willing to take that for a little bit until I get my PC repaired, because there is actually cross-save progression between the Xbox and, well, at the very least, the Game Pass and Windows version of the game. So that is a good thing. Now, there was some drama leading into this game. Obviously, DLSS is something that a lot of gamers these days are absolutely relying on to be able to play games at acceptable resolutions and frame rates. And this is a game that partnered with AMD. That means that it's all in on FSR2. FSR3 has been announced, by the way. I don't believe it's implemented in Starfield yet, though. And people essentially thought, oh damn, this is an AMD game, it's not going to have DLSS, and it truly is an AMD game. In fact, there's even a Starfield branded RX 7900 XTX and Ryzen 7 7800 X3D bundle. Yes, their product names are indeed rather confusing, and as for the 7900 XTX, it basically trades blows with a 4080, it costs less but won't be as good in ray tracing. I think for many people that probably looks quite attractive. That being said, I think its RRP is like $1,000, so it really is expensive. This game though does not have DLSS. Of course, DLSS is awesome, but it also is a moat. It is that layer of technology that NVIDIA is kind of placing in and around their cards that makes somebody think, well, you know, if I want to play a new game, it needs to support DLSS, right? So no DLSS does mean that people with the 2000 or 3000 series card maybe won't be getting the sorts of performance they could ultimately squeeze out if that technology were there. FSR2 is implemented, but FSR2 is not as good as DLSS 2. That being said, it turns out AMD didn't say no. In fact, Frank Azor, who's the head of gaming at AMD, told The Verge that they asked partners to prioritize AMD's upscaling tech, but that they actually don't mandate exclusivity. I think this absolutely means it would be great if there was a PC patch that actually brought DLSS 2 and 3 to this game. Now, that being said, AMD FSR 3 is something that has been announced. That is frame generation, okay? But it's not only for AMD cards. It actually works on the NVIDIA 2000 and 3000 series, which does mean that, yeah, if at least in striking distance of DLSS 3, then, I mean, hey, that's pretty sick. If you've got like a 3070, you're really not going to feel any want to upgrade then. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Another thing that has been interesting, and of course it's got many people, myself included, and that is the way that Microsoft are being crafty to earn a lot of money out of this game, which I suppose, as is, it is their right. They did acquire Bethesda, or ZeniMax even, for an awful lot of money. So here's the deal. I assumed that to get the early access version of the game, you just need to buy the digital deluxe or whatever it was, but that's actually not the case. Game Pass does count as you owning the game. All you need on top of Game Pass is to purchase the Premium Edition upgrade. So yes, you can buy the Premium Edition and the DLC, that kind of thing. You can essentially buy that on top of Game Pass without having to actually own the base game. For the pricing, the base game is $69.99 in the UK. The Deluxe Edition is £99 coming bundled with Future Story DLC, a skin pack, soundtrack, art book, and then the 5 days of early access. However, you can, for $34.99 or $31.49 if you've got Game Pass, get that Premium Edition upgrade. Now, for a lot of people, maybe adults with a bit of that disposable income, that actually, it's basically saying, hey, you can get it early. I mean, the release date is the early access date. That's what most people are going to think. You can get it early if you just spend, the price of 2 cinema tickets for, a whole unobstructed weekend of gameplay. I mean, I went and saw Oppenheimer at the cinema lately. It cost 15 quid at IMAX, and to me, it was worth it. I loved the movie. So that's just the kind of pricing psychology that they're going to be using with this one. And obviously, if you want, if you're a big fan of the game, you want access to it, and you also want to be able to get that Future Story DLC, yes, Game Pass plus the upgrade is a far lower upfront cost, and Game Pass itself is on top of that a really excellent value proposition. That does mean it'll lure people more into Game Pass, and that'll be a nice trickle down to the other Game Pass games, and it will keep people in their ecosystem. So really my TLDR here is, yeah, it's smart business, and it does feel kind of bad the way that the early access thing is happening. You could contrast it though with Sony. They have just increased the price of their PlayStation Plus yearly subscriptions, and of course new Sony games tend to not come out on PS Plus. The likes of God of War Ragnarok, they come out later, right? Spider-Man 2, it's not going to be there on on PlayStation Plus on launch day, or at the very least, for somebody who just has a Game Pass subscription, 5 days after early access, they can just play the big new game without any additional upfront cost. So even though it does feel bad in terms of a value proposition in the market, yeah, it's actually very competitive with Sony. Okay, there was a letter from Todd, an internal memo that leaked online. I'm not going to fully go through it, but I just want to call out a few things. He talked about pitching this game in 2013 to the now deceased Robert Altman, who co-founded ZeniMax many years ago. The core development of the game was from 2020 to 2023. However, you might think, 3 years? That's very fast for a big game. And yes, it absolutely is. I'd say core development's probably a little bit more than that, but also prototyping, right? Pre-production. For a game like this, those things are going to be absolutely humongous. So don't take this 2020 through 2023 that's mentioned in this memo as being like how long it takes to make a game like this. That's not really the case, because he does mention core development. Of course, core development is going to be when you are really ramping up production, right? So that's when the headcount is massively increasing, but you do need a pretty decent period of time before that. Because, I mean, hey, if you increase your headcount massively, but you don't have an amazing plan, then your game's going to be a shit show. And of course, playing AAA games, we are all too familiar with that kind of thing going on. He does call out QA's role, which is always nice to see. QA is often quite underappreciated. And thankfully, this is a game that, well, it seems QA had enough time and devs actually had enough time to act in QA. Kind of surprising when that happens. He also talked up Phil and Xbox as well. So that was the letter that leaked from Todd. Now, speaking of Phil Spencer, he did talk about having played 200 hours of the game across 15 playthroughs. Do, of course, remember that'll just be different times he's had to restart, likely because of different, development builds of the game. As for Phil, he likes being a space pirate, something I can get behind as somebody who at least likes the idea of playing a lot of Star Citizen. He also says it's more Oblivion than Skyrim, which to me is quite interesting. Oblivion, to me, was less kind of homogenous, and I think Oblivion had better side content as well. And of course, looking at the critical reviews, people are certainly talking up that side content as well. So that's actually quite good. Then to talk about scale and mods. So there's been talk of, thousands of planets, 10% of them are habitable. Procedural generation is used in addition to hundreds of hours worth of handcrafted content. There's people who've been playing this game for a long ass time and are basically saying there is so much here, especially, of course, with how innovative the New Game Plus feature of this game actually is. Again, Gene Park saying like, whoa, this is more than Nier Automata, which is like, again, a crazy thing to say, given just how high a bar for a New Game Plus implementation that, Nier sets. Now, according to Pete Hines, who, of course, we've talked about plenty of times on the channel, not all good, but anyway, per Pete, modders can create new quest lines, new characters, and also new planets. Modders will be able to use the procedural generation world creation tools to aid them as well. Now, you might be thinking, what about the Creation Club? And that's where I think about another Microsoft-owned game. I mean, there is the Creation Club in Skyrim and Fallout, obviously, but Minecraft, because you get the Minecraft Marketplace on Bedrock Edition for consoles. There, people buy the premium Minecraft coins, and you can buy all sorts of things. I remember playing things like Tekkit back in the day, right? The industrial Minecraft stuff. And now I can actually see like little mini expansions that are basically community mods that have been uploaded there. Well, not community mods, but projects anyway that have been released on the Minecraft Marketplace. So it seems like quite an interesting situation, really. On the one hand, it's ideal. I mean, say DVD et Impera. Imperial? I forget exactly, but the fantastic mod pack for like a lot of the Total War games, right? For Rome 2. That's amazing, and it's free. The other flip side to this is that if people can make money out of doing Creation Club stuff, well, then you can basically not really have to like rely on Bethesda to make DLCs, because instead there will be people who are probably earning like tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars by just making loads of good quality content that a form of market dictates has value, right? That's like the steel man, that's the bull case for the sort of Creation Club thing. Obviously the bear case is a lot of the bad things that happened, like community mods being yanked and stuff that's just not particularly good value. So we're going to have to see how that shakes out. Obviously we do know there is one piece of story DLC that's coming, because that's included in the premium edition. But what was said in a Gamescom interview is that they noted how Starfield could indeed be a Skyrim-like game in terms of how long its tail is as a product, and it seems that they have worked that into their plans. So I would imagine some sort of large Creation Club-like thing. And to be honest with you, for a game like this, I'd be totally down for that. Next then, scale bad? Okay, I would show you the video, but ZeniMax, of course, took it down because it was from a leaked version of the game. By the way, yes, leaked versions of the game. I believe there was a guy who works in distribution. He nabbed 67, if memory serves, copies of Starfield, and he tried to sell them to people. And of course, he also videotaped his crimes, even live streamed them. That's not a sensible thing to do. Tip: if you're doing a crime, don't shoot the evidence yourself and post it online. That's stupid. Anyway, that person's been arrested and is likely in some form of trouble. Okay, one of the things that leaked, though, was somebody basically just in a section of the game world running, and they run for like 10 minutes, and they hit a boundary. And the game pop-up says, open map to load another region or return to your ship. And people are like, what? You can only run for 10 minutes? Or 20 minutes or whatever it was? I think it was 10. The thing is, people who've actually played the game, who are sort of playing the game naturally, basically say that would never happen. They've literally never seen it in 2 weeks of playing, and it's a non-issue. So again, this is just down to how the game is actually stitched together, likely because it is, it's loading in like little divided chunks of the game all at once, which in a way is unfortunate. However, right, if they're making this in Creation Engine and they're not going to do a complete from the ground up new tech stack for their game, well, something's got to give, right? So it's that thing where you could go Star Citizen if you wanted, right? Where that whole planet is really there. You can go absolutely anywhere. The level of, the floating point precision supported by the engine is absolutely cracked, right? You could do that. But all the time you're doing that, you're not going to be confidently able to build content for the game. what are you going to do? Something's got to give. And ultimately, I think they made the right choice. Often there are levels of simulation that are great for the most hardcore, but ultimately it's like, yeah, maybe we'll have to dock a point for that. Maybe the game only gets to be a 9 out of 10 because it's held back by those technical limitations, but the thing that you buy from taking that knowing loss is, the game actually exists. Your team, as it is able to build the game and people can play it. So it's one of those things, kind of sucks, but them's the breaks, and in realistic gameplay scenarios, people are not reporting that it is a problem whatsoever. The Elder Scrolls 6. It's going to be a while. Now, in between the lines, there's something that Todd couldn't really say, which is basically just, yeah, we totally just announced The Elder Scrolls 6, because at the same time, we also announced Fallout 76, which we weren't sure if you would like, and The Elder Scrolls Blades, which is a mobile game. So, they had to actually show a real core Bethesda thing in order to, keep people happy. Now, of course, what we have since learned is that the Bethesda of that era, the ZeniMax of that era, was making that very large push into live games. That's where Redfall, of course, came from, where Arcane Austin were basically, they were basically made to make a multiplayer co-op loot shooter. And of course, that initial vision was quite significantly stripped back to but not really be as egregious. But of course, it was not a successful game. Of course, Wolfenstein Youngblood, that was a mistake, and many other decisions that company made. So it still is that very rumbly time. So basically, I think you obviously can't talk about that, but I think we very much all know that is the reason why The Elder Scrolls 6 was announced so damn early. What we can, though, say is that The Elder Scrolls 6 is in development right now. That said, right, so if core development lasts for 3 years like it did for Starfield, and you've got maybe 2 years of pre-production, prototyping, all that stuff to do beforehand, I would call 2028. Perhaps. That's maybe 2027, but that's really a push. It kind of depends what else is on the cards for them. And especially remember, because they're now owned by Microsoft, first party will have different priorities to ZeniMax when they were acting as a third-party studio. What does Microsoft want? It wants blockbusters with massive IP that will build its platform. As for ZeniMax, well, back in the past, right? They didn't care about pushing a platform. They just needed to sell copies. They're a third party, right? Ideally in the Bethesda Games launcher, if you remember that absurd thing. So really, the situation is different. I can very much see Microsoft just letting them focus on The Elder Scrolls 6, not really doing any sort of ill-fated misadventures like with 76, which in fairness has somewhat turned around. So yeah, 2028, maybe 2027, but probably on the Xbox Series X too. The Xbox 720, the Xbox 2, or the Xbox 2X. Who the hell knows what they'll call the damn thing, but almost certainly on the next generation of consoles. Wouldn't be surprised if they're going to use Avowed as a late generation title to kind of tide us over, and then maybe use the Elder Scrolls 6 as the absolute, big wedge to get people over to a Microsoft platform with the next console generation. That's kind of what I would envision. As for me then, well, I'm visiting family this weekend, so I don't get to spend 20 or 30 hours playing Starfield, which is sad to me. Because it does seem a lot of the things that I would like to get from Star Citizen eventually are actually present here. For me, of course, the big suck is the immediate version of the game that I'm playing is 30 FPS. That, even though it's a pretty good 30 FPS, that does not spark joy whatsoever. I need to fix my PC so that I can play this at a true frame rate, such as 60. Ideally a bit higher. So that's it from me. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your experience has been. And once I've got a lot more hours in, sadly at 30 FPS, I'll update you come next week.